Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. What if America's darkest secrets weren't buried in textbooks, but still lingered in the shadows of its oldest buildings, echoing through time in the form of whispers, cold drafts, and ghostly sightings? This question sets the tone for a chilling exploration into the haunted corners of U.S. history. Throughout the country, certain places carry with them a reputation not just for historical significance, but for being hosts to unexplained phenomena. From the blood-stained battlefields of Gettysburg to the prison cells of Alcatraz, and from the echoing hallways of the White House to the lingering spirits at plantation mansions, these sites blend recorded fact with centuries of eerie legend. Some say it's the trauma of war, injustice, or tragedy that left these psychic imprints behind. Others believe the stories are born from folklore and fear. But one thing is certain: these locations have captured the imagination of generations. In this video, we'll journey through some of the most famously haunted places in America, uncovering the history behind the legends and asking, are these just ghost stories, or is something truly lingering beyond the veil? Eastern State Penitentiary in Philadelphia stands as one of the most haunting symbols of America's complex relationship with crime, punishment, and reform. Opened in 1829, it was revolutionary for its time, designed with the goal of inspiring true penitence in prisoners through complete isolation. Its radial structure, with long corridors extending like spokes from a central hub, became the model for over 300 prisons worldwide. But the ideals of reform quickly gave way to a much darker reality. Prisoners were confined alone in small cells, often for 23 hours a day, with minimal human contact. Meals were passed through small slots, hoods were placed over their heads when moved, and the silence was deafening. While it was originally intended to foster reflection and rehabilitation, this extreme isolation led many inmates to madness, deep depression, or psychological breakdowns, an unintended form of torture. Over the decades, the prison housed thousands of inmates, including infamous criminals like Al Capone. After its closure in 1971, rumors and reports of hauntings began to circulate. Visitors and staff have described eerie experiences: disembodied voices echoing from cell block 12, shadowy figures darting across corridors, and an overwhelming feeling of dread in certain areas. Paranormal investigators have flagged Eastern State as one of the most active haunted sites in America. Yet beneath the ghost stories lies a more chilling legacy. This prison's philosophy helped shape the American penal system. Its emphasis on solitary confinement has had lasting and controversial effects, influencing practices that persist in modern incarceration. Eastern State is not just haunted by spirits, but by the consequences of a deeply flawed vision of justice. Perched in the rugged beauty of Estes Park, Colorado, the Stanley Hotel opened its doors in 1909 as a luxurious mountain retreat for the elite escaping the heat and grime of the eastern cities. Built by Freeland Oscar Stanley of Stanley Steamer fame, the hotel was a marvel of modernity and elegance, complete with electricity, telephones, and ensuite bathrooms, a rarity at the time. Its grand halls and breathtaking views quickly attracted wealthy tourists, helping to spark the rise of luxury tourism in the American West. The hotel played a key role in turning the untamed Rocky Mountains into a destination of leisure, sophistication, and natural wonder. But the Stanley Hotel's fame transcended its Gilded Age splendor when it became the eerie inspiration for Stephen King's novel, The Shining. During a stay in 1974, King and his wife were the only guests in the hotel as it was closing for the season. That unsettling isolation, combined with the hotel's vintage grandeur, sparked his vision of the Overlook Hotel. Since then, the Stanley has become synonymous with supernatural intrigue. Guests and staff have reported unexplained piano music, echoing from the empty ballroom, believed to be played by Flora Stanley herself. Others have seen apparitions roaming the halls or felt mysterious cold spots and flickering lights. The Stanley Hotel, in its pristine colonial revival architecture nestled in the Colorado Rockies, represents far more than just a picturesque vacation spot. It is a living artifact of early 20th century American ambition, an era when wealth and innovation were rapidly transforming not just cities, but the wilderness itself. Built by Freeland Oscar Stanley, a man emblematic of the American industrial spirit, the hotel was meant to be a beacon of luxury in a rugged frontier. Its refined aesthetics, cutting-edge technology, and remote yet majestic location made it a paradox. A palace in the wild, catering to a generation of elites who were learning to blend adventure with opulence. But over time, that physical grandeur began to coexist with something more intangible: an atmosphere, a presence, a sense that the past had not entirely gone silent. Stories of unexplained music playing in empty rooms, apparitions appearing without warning, and the eerie sense of being watched have embedded the Stanley Hotel in the broader tapestry of American ghost lore. These ghost stories are not just entertainment. They reflect the human need to connect emotionally with history. In a place where luxury once masked solitude and isolation could feel both serene and unsettling, the whispers of the past are amplified. This dual identity, both as a historical landmark and a haunted icon, gives the Stanley Hotel its enduring mystique. It's a place where the boundary between the real and the imagined is intentionally blurred, where visitors come to see not only the lavish woodwork and mountain views, but also to feel the presence of those who may never have left. In that sense, the Stanley is not just a hotel. It's a repository of American memory, where history doesn't just sit in the past, but lingers, echoes, and perhaps even speaks. The Myrtles Plantation in St. Francisville, Louisiana, is often called one of the most haunted homes in America, but its legacy is rooted in far more than ghost stories. It's a reflection of a painful, complex chapter of U.S. history. Built in 1796, the plantation was part of the antebellum South's agricultural economy, which depended heavily on enslaved labor. Like many such estates, the Myrtles was more than a home. It was a site of profound human suffering where lives were controlled, broken, and often erased from record. That dark foundation is what gives its ghost legends such emotional power, because behind every myth is the unspoken reality of those who lived and died under brutal conditions. The most famous ghost associated with the Myrtles is Chloe, an enslaved woman said to have been punished and killed after eavesdropping or possibly poisoning the plantation owner's family. According to legend, she now haunts the grounds, particularly a mirror where spirits are said to be trapped. The image of Chloe has even appeared in widely circulated photographs, further fueling the plantation's haunted reputation. Yet historians have found no solid evidence that Chloe ever existed in the historical records of the plantation. This doesn't discredit the story completely. It may have evolved from a real person whose life was lost to time, reshaped over generations into a narrative that speaks to guilt, injustice, and the power of storytelling. The haunting reputation of the Myrtles Plantation is often marketed as a chilling Southern ghost story, complete with apparitions, phantom children, and cold drafts that seemingly come from nowhere. But beneath these eerie tales lies something much more profound and unsettling: a legacy of American slavery that continues to echo through both the physical space of the plantation and the national consciousness. The stories told at the Myrtles, whether believed to be supernatural or dismissed as psychological phenomena, are not just entertainment. They serve as a form of cultural memory, a way for people to process and engage with a painful and unresolved past. The plantation, like many others, in the American South, was built and sustained by the forced labor of enslaved African Americans. The human suffering, violence, and trauma embedded in that system did not simply vanish with emancipation. They lingered, unspoken and unresolved, passed down through generations. In this way, the ghost stories of the Myrtles are symbolic manifestations of that buried trauma. When visitors report feelings of unease, see spectral figures on staircases, or hear disembodied voices of children, these experiences, whether real, imagined, or induced by suggestion, are inextricably tied to the plantation's dark history. The ghosts people encounter are as much about memory as they are about mystery. Importantly, ghost stories allow for a confrontation with the past in a way that history books often don't. They invite emotional engagement, evoking curiosity, fear, empathy, and discomfort. In places like the Myrtles, haunted lore becomes a conduit for reckoning with slavery without necessarily naming it outright. This can be both powerful and problematic. On one hand, it acknowledges that something profoundly wrong happened on these grounds. On the other hand, the transformation of human suffering into folklore risks trivializing the real violence and reducing history to spectacle. Still, these myths contain a deeper truth, that history, especially one marked by brutality and injustice, refuses to be buried. The past bleeds into the present, not just through documents and monuments, but through emotions, family stories, and yes, even ghost tales. The continued fascination with haunted plantations underscores how unresolved the legacy of slavery remains in America. The nation is still working to fully acknowledge and come to terms with its origins, and sites like the Myrtles serve as unsettling reminders that trauma leaves marks on places, on people, and on collective memory. In this way, the ghost lore of the Myrtles plantation is not merely about fright. It is a cultural symptom of suppressed reckoning. The myths and legends, while often fictionalized or exaggerated, reflect a yearning to connect with the emotional reality of a history too long sanitized or ignored. They urge visitors and storytellers alike to recognize that behind every haunted tale lies a human truth, and that some shadows are cast not by ghosts, but by the unfinished business of a nation's conscience. Waverly Hills Sanatorium in Louisville, Kentucky, is a chilling reminder of how public health crises were handled during the early 20th century, and how trauma can leave its mark not just on individuals, but on entire structures. Originally opened in 1910 as a tuberculosis hospital, Waverly Hills was built to isolate and treat patients suffering from what was then called the White Plague. At the time, TB was incurable, highly contagious, and deeply feared. With no antibiotics available, treatment focused on rest, fresh air, and rudimentary medical procedures that now seem barbaric, like lung collapse therapy or rib removal. The Nsawine facility was isolated on a hilltop to prevent the spread of disease, but for those sent there, it often became a place of no return. Tragedy defined the daily rhythm at Waverly Hills. It's estimated that thousands of patients died there, especially during peak outbreaks. To maintain morale among the living and shield them from the overwhelming sight of so many corpses, hospital staff used a hidden tunnel system known as the body chute, a sloped corridor that discreetly transported bodies from the upper floors to the base of the hill for removal. It's this grim feature that first gave rise to the sanatorium's reputation as a haunted place. Visitors and investigators report strange noises, apparitions, and cold spots in and around the tunnel, suggesting that some souls never left. Among the most infamous locations in Waverly Hills is room 502. According to legend, this room saw the suicide of a nurse who was either overwhelmed by her surroundings or possibly hiding a pregnancy scandal. Reports of voices, shadows, and even screams have been linked to this space. Other stories mention ghostly children, likely former patients, seen playing with visitors or rolling balls down hallways where no living feet tread. But beyond the ghost stories, Waverly Hills forces us to reflect on the human cost of disease and the limits of early medicine. It reminds us that public health has a history filled with desperation, sacrifice, and unintended cruelty. The paranormal fascination with the sanatorium may stem from more than just fear. It also expresses a collective need to honor those who suffered, to remember lives lost in isolation, and to ask how we can do better when facing the next great health crisis. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, stands as one of the most puzzling and haunting architectural wonders in the United States. Its story begins with Sarah Winchester, the widow of William Wirt Winchester, heir to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company, the manufacturer of the infamous gun that won the West. Following the deaths of her infant daughter and husband, Sarah inherited a vast fortune and reportedly fell into a deep period of mourning and spiritual crisis. According to legend, a medium told her she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by Winchester rifles, and that she needed to build a house continuously to appease them, or risk being consumed by them herself. From this, a house of obsession was born. For nearly 4 decades, construction on the Winchester mansion continued day and night, with no master plan and no end in sight. The result is a sprawling Victorian labyrinth filled with bizarre features: staircases that lead to ceilings, doors that open into walls, windows set into floors, and hallways that double back on themselves. To many, it seemed as if Sarah Winchester was trying to confuse the spirits, or perhaps avoid them altogether. But beneath the folklore lies a deeper psychological and cultural significance. Whether or not Sarah truly believed she was building, for ghosts, the mansion reflects an unresolved grief and a symbolic reckoning with the violence tied to her family's wealth. It's not just a haunted house, it's a physical manifestation of guilt, loss, and perhaps even penance. Every disorienting hallway and empty room could represent a life lost, a future stolen by the pull of a trigger. The story of the Winchester Mystery House is often treated as an eccentric tale of a haunted heiress, Sarah Winchester, driven to endlessly build onto her mansion to appease vengeful spirits. But beneath the sensationalism lies a much more haunting truth. The house is a physical expression of deeper, collective anxieties embedded in American history, especially the violent legacy of guns, conquest, and capitalism. The possibility that Sarah felt haunted by the victims of Winchester rifles, firearms synonymous with westward expansion and frontier warfare, taps directly into the darker, unspoken consequences of American progress. The Winchester repeating rifle was famously dubbed the gun that won the West, a phrase that romanticizes a period marked by the displacement and slaughter of indigenous peoples, violent land grabs, and the normalization of firearms as central to American identity. Each trigger pulled with a Winchester rifle was part of a larger narrative of domination, of manifest destiny, and the relentless pursuit of territory, resources, and power. Sarah Winchester, inheritor of immense wealth built on this legacy, found herself surrounded not only by opulence, but by a profound, inescapable grief, her own, and perhaps more symbolically, that of a nation whose prosperity was born of bloodshed. In this context, the labyrinthine design of the Winchester Mystery House takes on new meaning. It wasn't just random or bizarre. It may have been an attempt to create a spiritual labyrinth, to confuse the spirits, or to provide a never-ending space for atonement. The staircases that lead nowhere, the doors that open into walls, and the disorienting layout echo a kind of psychological torment, a guilt so overwhelming it could only be expressed through architecture. Whether Sarah genuinely believed in ghosts or not, the house becomes a metaphor for a conscience in turmoil, for a legacy that could not be escaped. As a structure, the house mirrors the American psyche, vast, inventive, and industrious, yet built upon unresolved trauma. In its endless hallways, we can see how the pursuit of profit, when decoupled from accountability, creates systems that are both grand and grotesque. The story of Sarah Winchester, when viewed through this lens, becomes less about madness and more about moral reckoning. It forces us to consider the emotional cost of historical violence and how wealth and innovation can become prisons when rooted in suffering. Ultimately, the Winchester Mystery House isn't just haunted by imagined spirits, it's haunted by the very real legacy of American violence and the deep, unresolved grief it leaves behind. It invites us to look past the ghost stories and ask harder questions about what we inherit, what we avoid confronting, and how we attempt to make peace with histories that resist closure. The Gettysburg Battlefield in Pennsylvania is not just a hallowed ground where over 50,000 soldiers fell during the bloodiest battle of the Civil War in 1863. It is a site where history's deepest emotional scars seem to linger, calling forth the spirits of those who fought, suffered, and died in one of the war's most pivotal moments. Gettysburg is more than a battlefield. It's a place where the echoes of the past still reverberate through the rolling hills, and where reports of ghostly activity have intrigued and frightened visitors for generations. The Battle of Gettysburg was a decisive turning point in the Civil War, with Union forces achieving a crucial victory over the Confederate Army. But the price was immense. Thousands of men perished, their lives cut short in a fierce struggle that marked the brutal reality of war. The battlefield, which spans over 6,000 acres, still holds the emotional residue of this immense loss. Visitors and paranormal investigators alike report hearing the sounds of phantom cannon fire echoing through the woods, the march of invisible soldiers' footsteps on the ground, and even the cries of the wounded carried on the wind. One of the most well-known ghost sightings is that of Confederate and Union soldiers walking along the fields or appearing on horseback. The most famous location for these apparitions is the Devil's Den, where fierce fighting took place and where soldiers on both sides fell in large numbers. Many claim to have seen figures in Civil War-era uniforms, often appearing briefly before vanishing into thin air. In addition, the sound of distant cannon fire is commonly reported, as if the battle never truly ended. Some even claim to have heard ghostly soldiers crying out for help, calling to those who pass by. The idea of lingering spirits is not purely folkloric. It reflects a deeper connection to the trauma that war leaves behind. The emotional impact of the battle was so profound, it seems to have left a lasting mark on the land itself. The phenomenon of historical trauma suggests that places tied to immense loss or suffering can retain an energy that manifests in ways people can feel, even decades or centuries later. In the case of Gettysburg, the spirits may not just be wandering ghosts. They could be fragments of the intense emotional turmoil and tragedy that unfolded on the field. Gettysburg's haunting is a reminder that war does not simply end with a treaty or ceasefire. It lingers in the hearts of survivors, in the stories passed down through generations, and in the land where so much blood was spilled. Whether one believes in the supernatural or not, the historical trauma of Gettysburg is undeniable, and its ghosts, real or imagined, are part of the continuing legacy of America's struggle to reconcile its past. The Lizzie Borden House in Fall River, Massachusetts, stands as one of the most infamous sites in American criminal history. In 1892, the brutal double murder of Lizzie Borden's father, Andrew Borden, and her stepmother, Abby Borden, shocked the nation and became a scandal that would echo through generations. The case remains unsolved in many people's minds, with the trial capturing the nation's imagination and creating a media frenzy that still lingers in the public consciousness. Lizzie Borden, a seemingly respectable young woman in a quiet, conservative New England town, was accused of murdering her father and stepmother with an axe in their home. The crime itself was horrific. Andrew Borden was hacked to death while he napped in a chair, and Abby Borden was murdered in the upstairs bedroom. Despite the overwhelming evidence and the gruesome nature of the crime, Lizzie was acquitted of all charges, leading to widespread speculation and scandal. Many believed she was guilty, yet no one could definitively prove it, and the trial became a spectacle, with the press eagerly reporting every detail, further stoking the mystery. The murder trial was a reflection of the societal views of the time, particularly regarding women and their roles in Victorian society. Lizzie Borden was an unmarried woman in her 30s, a spinster by the standards of her day, and her behavior was often scrutinized. She had a strained relationship with her stepmother, and some speculated that she had become frustrated with her father's tight-fisted financial habits. In a society where women were expected to behave in certain ways, Lizzie's independent nature and apparent emotional detachment made her an easy target for suspicion. Her trial raised questions about the treatment of women, gender expectations, and the complexities of justice in a period when women had limited power or agency. Despite being acquitted, the case has never been fully closed in the eyes of many, and the Lizzie Borden House has since gained a reputation as a site of eerie happenings and paranormal activity. Today, the house is a popular tourist attraction, offering guided tours, and it's claimed by many that the spirits of the murdered Borden family still haunt the place. Paranormal investigators and visitors alike report hearing strange noises, voices, footsteps, and even unexplained whispers. Apparitions of shadowy figures have been spotted, and some claim to have seen the ghostly image of Lizzie herself, still wandering the house where her family met their tragic end. The most active areas of the house, according to some reports, are the rooms where the murders took place, with some visitors claiming to feel an inexplicable coldness or unease. The lingering presence of the Bordens in their own home raises questions about justice, guilt, and the passage of time. Why would the spirits of such a violent event remain in the place of the crime? Whether or not one believes in the supernatural, the Lizzie Borden house serves as a powerful reminder of the unresolved mystery that still haunts Fall River, and a reflection on the historical context of gender, justice, and the cultural expectations that shaped the outcome of one of America's most notorious murder cases. The fact that Lizzie was acquitted, despite many believing in her guilt, suggests how societal norms can influence the legal system. It also points to how the legacy of such events can live on, not only in public memory, but in the ghostly echoes that supposedly haunt the very walls of the house where it all took place. The Bell Witch Cave in Adams, Tennessee, is one of the most enduring and chilling tales in American folklore. Dating back to the early 1800s, the legend centers around a series of terrifying disturbances experienced by the Bell family, particularly John Bell and his daughter Betsy. What makes this haunting so unique is its rich oral tradition, its integration into local culture, and the fact that it was reportedly well documented at the time, including an alleged account from future President Andrew Jackson, who is said to have encountered the entity himself. The legend begins when the Bell family moved to the Red River area, now Adams, TN, in the early 1800s. Not long after settling into their farmhouse, they began experiencing strange phenomena. It started subtly, knocking on walls, the sound of chains dragging, and faint whispering voices. But over time, the disturbances intensified. Family members were slapped, pinched, and even had their hair pulled by an invisible force. The entity seemed to focus its energy on young Betsy Bell, who endured years of physical and psychological torment. The poltergeist introduced itself as Kate and claimed to be the spirit of a local woman with unfinished business. Over time, Kate became known as the Bell Witch. The entity spoke in a disembodied voice and reportedly engaged in conversations with family members and visitors. Her presence attracted widespread attention. Some neighbors, clergy, and curious onlookers came to witness the strange events for themselves. The most famous of these accounts involves General Andrew Jackson, who allegedly visited the Bell home with an entourage, only to flee in fear after a chilling encounter with the witch. What to you sets the Bell Witch story apart from typical ghost tales is its deep roots in oral history. The story has been passed down through generations, preserved through regional folklore and storytelling. The Bell Witch Cave, located near the original site of the Bell family farm, is believed by some to be a source or resting place of the Yi spirit, and it continues to draw curious visitors and paranormal enthusiasts to this day. But like many frontier legends, the Bell Witch tale blurs the line between folklore and historical fact. There are no official court records or contemporaneous documentation from the early 1800s confirming every detail, and skeptics point out the possibility of exaggeration or mass hysteria. Still, the cultural impact of the story is undeniable. It reflects the fears and superstitions of early American settlers, who lived in a rugged, isolated environment where folklore helped make sense of the unknown. Supernatural tales provided both entertainment and moral instruction in communities where religion and folklore were deeply intertwined. Whether the Bell Witch was a real poltergeist, a figment of a troubled household's imagination, or a symbolic tale shaped by early frontier anxieties, her story continues to haunt the American South. The cave itself, still open to the public, is a physical portal to a legend that refuses to die, a reminder of how deeply fear, belief, and storytelling are etched into the American historical landscape. As we emerge from the shadows of America's most haunted locations, one truth lingers. Beneath the surface of history lies a deeper story, one shaped not only by facts and events, but by emotion, trauma, and the human need to explain the unexplained. From the echoing cell blocks of Eastern State Penitentiary to the whispered legends of the Bell Witch Cave, these places aren't just haunted by spirits, they're haunted by memory. Whether these stories stem from genuine encounters or are shaped by folklore passed down through generations, they reveal how deeply we are connected to our past. So, have you walked through the Stanley Hotel's halls or descended into the eerie tunnels of Waverly Hills? Have you stood at Gettysburg and felt the weight of the silence? We'd love to hear your stories. Drop a comment if you've ever visited or would dare to visit any of these haunted locations. And this is just the beginning. Want more haunted history? Stay tuned, because next time we're taking you beyond America's borders to explore the most chilling, ghost-filled sites around the globe. Hit that subscribe button and don't miss what's hiding in the shadows.